For today's video, we're going to be talking about camera settings. You guys ready? Come on. Alright, so you just bought yourself a new camera and you don't know how to use it. You don't understand manual settings, exposure, all that stuff. Well, in today's video, we're going to talk about everything camera settings. So if you're just starting out or you're a professional, you might learn a few things. Alright, so there's one thing I need to change. This doesn't really feel right. I don't like the mood right now, so let's switch it up. Alright, that's much better now. Okay, so let's get in the video tutorial part. Now, if you're shooting on a phone, I'd highly recommend that you download the Blackmagic camera application. It's a free app on the App Store that really allows you to dial in and control all of your camera settings and allows you more control over your phone. We have three primary settings that we need to change in order to affect our camera exposure. Those are ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. And I'm going to make a video later on explaining the exposure triangle a little bit more in detail. However, in order to keep this video shorter, I'm going to condense all of that information into a few quick tips. So the first thing we'll change is ISO. Now, ISO is basically the amount of light that is entering and hitting your camera sensor. And it's probably one of the most important settings on your camera that a lot of people don't exactly know how to utilize it, because it basically dictates how clean your image is going to be. Now, when I say clean, I mean how much noise the sensor is going to add into your image. The higher the number, the brighter the image will be, but at the cost of noisier footage. At the higher number, the sensor works harder to expose the image, adding more camera noise to your shot. This is usually something you would like to avoid and leads me to the next thing, which is your camera's native ISO. You want to figure out what your individual camera's native ISO is in order to have the cleanest image. So a general rule of thumb is when you're filming inside, you want to keep your ISO between 320 to about 640 depending on the camera model. This will allow you to keep the blacks in the image as clean as possible and avoid any additional noise. But this means that the image will be much darker and you'll need to light the actual shot. If you're shooting outside or in a bright area, you have to increase the ISO. So you'd be shooting between 1000, 1280, or again, very dependent on your camera model. And shooting at a higher ISO will allow you to retain the highlights and help you from peaking in your highlights. So again, when you're inside, shoot at a lower ISO. When you're outside, shoot at a higher ISO within the range of your camera. This will give you the best options in post. It's important to understand how ISO works. But for now, just stick to your native ISO. In this case, I'm using 640 since that's the limit or the native ISO for the A7S III, while I'm shooting in the S-Log3 profile. That was just the surface level, but that's it for ISO. It's hard to talk about shutter speed without mentioning frame rate. So the standard is 24 frames per second. If you're shooting at 24 frames per second, your shutter speed should be 1/48. Now the reason it's 48 is mainly because it's adjusted to how our eyes see motion blur. And in order to test that, you can simply wave your hand in front of your face and see the streaks that your fingers are leaving behind. And when you're filming at 1/48, it's pretty close to how your eye sees that naturally. So it's really the motion or the movement that we've become accustomed to when watching Hollywood films. And so that's the rule of shutter speed. Now again, the more you understand the rule, the more you know how to break it. So if you want to create more of a sluggish or slow moving shutter speed, you can shoot at a lower shutter speed. So anything between 1/5 to 1/30th of a shutter speed, depending on what's your intention. If you want something with less motion blur and have everything ultra sharp, you can increase it to 1/120 or 200 or 300, depending on the look that you're going for. But the standard is 24 frames per second at 1/48, but you'll notice for a lot of DSLRs, you don't have 1/48. So you go to the closest, which is 1/50th of a shutter speed. All right, so the next thing you'll have to change is white balance. Now, without overcomplicating it, if you're inside, shoot at 32,000 Kelvin. And if you're outside, shoot at 56,000 Kelvin, and then you adjust accordingly. There's amazing videos on YouTube if you really want to dive deeper into white balancing, but at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. It's a very crucial thing to make your videos look good. If it looks too yellow, bring it down from 56 to 32. If it looks too blue, bring it up from 32 to 56. And if you really want to get that spot on white balance, bring yourself a white card, an exposure card, or even a piece of paper. Hold it in front of your camera and adjust it until the paper is white. All right, so the last adjustment is aperture. The aperture controls how much light enters your camera sensor. So the smaller the number, the blurrier the background will be. So anything between 1.4 to 4 will result in a blurrier background. Now this attracts more attention to the subject, so to the person talking, because you're less distracted by what's in focus in the background. And by doing this, it means it's a shallower depth of field. And if you want a deeper depth of field, you'll be shooting anywhere between f8 to f22, and everything in the background will be in focus. Alright, well that's it for this video. I hope you guys learned a lot about camera settings, and I'm looking at making more in-depth videos on everything, but I kind of wanted to do a simple video that covers all the basics and allows you to get started without really flooding you with too much information. Because it can get very daunting and there's a lot of information out there. It's very, very technical. But at the end of the day, if you know these simple settings, you don't need to be super technical to get a good image. So, hey, just go out, shoot, be creative, learn how your camera works. And if you guys like this, please like the video, comment below if you have any questions, and thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you guys. And I'll see you all in the next video. All right, ciao now. Entries that I'm working on. And hey, if you spot the cat, there he goes.